And here we see the plane that left from Delaware, arriving at Joint Base Andrews. On the plane, of course, the incoming president, the 46th president of the United States, will be sworn in tomorrow at noon. He flew privately. He did not fly, as is standard, on a military plane, on a plane provided by the outgoing administration, which people on the campaign say, Abby, is yet another example of the outgoing administration not rolling out the welcome mat.
Very much so. And in so many ways, this moment feels like Joe Biden is landing in Washington, which is, by the way, a little bit of a fortress right now because of all the security around this nation's capital. But he's landing almost with a parallel administration, preparing to stand up a parallel administration while the current administration is still in power, and almost barely recognizing the incoming administration, which is so unlike what we are used to in this country. Usually there are so many lengths that are gone to make sure that there is the appearance of a handoff. But now you see Joe Biden arriving in a pretty nondescript airplane, not a government airplane, and arriving to a capital that has been fortified in part because of the threats that he potentially faces after what we saw happen at the nation's capital about 2 weeks ago. And you can see there an actual government plane right on the tarmac at Joint Base Andrews, making that contrast even more stark. Perhaps one of the planes that is considered Air Force One. It's not Air Force One, of course, until the president is on it, but that looked like one of the planes that the president normally uses. Let's bring in senior Washington correspondent Jeff Zeleny, who's on the National Mall for us. And Jeff, as we watch this moment in history, President-elect Biden touching down at Joint Base Andrews, his plane passing by, his private plane passing by the plane, one of the planes that is used as Air Force One. We are really seeing the beginnings of this transition starting right now.
Jake, we absolutely are, and all of the roads that we are about to see President-elect Joe Biden pass through over the next several hours into tomorrow. He has traveled down all of these roads before. He has landed so many times at Joint Base Andrews. He has come here to the National Mall, and we'll see him later on the Lincoln Memorial, but he has never done it in this moment on the cusp of becoming the 46th president of the United States. And this city, this country, indeed the world, has changed dramatically, Jake, since Mr. Biden left this capital 4 years ago as vice president. And this is just something that, cannot be said enough. This is a different moment, but this is why he was elected. This is why more than 80 million Americans elected Joe Biden to come and take over this country, to try and heal this country, to try and turn around the pandemic. And that is something we are going to see first and foremost as he makes his first stop here on the Lincoln Mall, and he'll be standing on the Lincoln Memorial seeing 400 separate lights signifying those 400,000 Americans who have died in less than a year of COVID. And as we see his plane there, again, he'll be taxiing, he'll be coming out with Jill Biden, his family also joining him. And we did see a remarkable send-off in Delaware. He became emotional as he took that short flight here. And we should also point out, Jake, he wanted to make this journey on Amtrak. He wanted to come back to Washington as he had traveled some 8,000 times as a senator over more than 4 decades, or nearly 4 decades, from Wilmington to Washington, but security concerns did not allow that. So that is just underscoring the moment here as we see his plane pivoting there. And this is just something that he is, so many challenges are awaiting him. But again, he was elected for this moment. Now he will have to deliver on his pledge of saying help is on the way. That is what he now will talk about tomorrow in that inaugural address. But before all of that, he will come here to the mall and pay tribute to the victims of COVID-19, and he will be remaining here overnight in the Blair House across from the White House. Of course, tomorrow we'll be going to Mass at Cathedral of St. Matthew the Apostle. So really all the pomp and circumstance, but far more muted than at any other inaugural he's ever been to, and he's certainly been to a lot, Jake.
That's right. If you're just joining us, we're watching Joe Biden in a private plane touching down at Joint Base Andrews. The Biden transition team says that the Trump administration did not offer a military plane for him to fly down in. which is standard protocol. Just another example of this rather rocky transition of power, because the outgoing president would not accept the election results. CNN political correspondent Arlette Saenz is also on the National Mall, has been covering, like Jeff Zeleny has been covering Joe Biden for years now, and his presidential quest. And Arlette, it was very emotional when Joe Biden said goodbye to Delaware this morning and talked about, of course, his fallen son, Beau Biden, and how he should be the one being sworn in as president.
Yeah, Jake, it's very clear that Beau Biden is at the top of mind and in the hearts of President-elect Biden and his family as they make this journey down to Washington to see Biden sworn in as the 46th president of the United States after he had pursued the presidency for decades. And you heard the president-elect talking about Beau's service and the impact of his life, but also that impact that Delaware had on his life. You know, but Joe Biden often talks about his boyhood in Scranton, Pennsylvania, but it's Delaware that made Joe Biden into the political figure that he is, bringing him to Washington for 36 years as a senator, and then those 8 years he served in the White House. And as you guys have talked about, Joe Biden has landed countless times at Joint Base Andrews, flying on Air Force Two while he was vice president. I had the chance to fly on Air Force Two with the then Vice President Biden many times, and it was always a powerful moment whenever you see someone of that stature landing in this way. And today it's a little bit of a different format, given that he is flying on a private plane, but still the significance of him coming to Washington after all these years where he grew up in the Senate, you know, right after the death of his daughter and wife in that tragic car accident. It was the Senate that really gave him a lot of purpose and finding meaning in public service, as well as raising his young boys. And now he will be returning here to Washington, which is in a very different reality than when he left it. And tomorrow, when he goes to the Capitol for his swearing in, that will be the first time that he is back here after that insurrection there just 2 weeks ago. And the president-elect has talked about how the Senate holds very personal meaning for him and his family. And tomorrow he will be there on the steps of Capitol Hill as he's inaugurated.
Arlette Saenz, thank you so much. And we're watching and waiting for the 46th President of the United States, President-elect Biden, to come out of the plane. And it is really remarkable, Dana, that once again we see an example of the Trump administration, which will end tomorrow at noon, refusing to abide by basic decency and protocols by sending a plane to pick up Joe Biden. That's why Joe Biden is on this private plane.
It is, and at the same time, an example of Joe Biden and his transition, soon to be his administration, just working around it and trying to keep their eye on the ball, which is a very, very important ball. Actually, there are multiple balls that they have to keep their eye on right now. But in the meantime, before he takes that oath, this is a moment. I mean, imagine what is going on the plane right now, the conversations being had between the president-elect, the soon-to-be First Lady, and his family, who have tried and failed at this quest for the White House. This is the third time, two times they tried and failed. And he finally got there, and he will be the oldest person to have victory and to be the president of the United States. And he's been, as we just heard from Arlette and Jeff, been in this place waiting on the tarmac so many times before in his life. I mean, there are times when you have people who are very new to this. I mean, not the least of which was the man who Joe Biden is replacing, but it's so familiar and yet so new all at the same time for Joe Biden.
He has never landed at Joint Base Andrews under circumstances like this, not just because he'll be the president, but because of just the task that is ahead of him. I mean, this country has not been in the middle of so many different crises in such a long time. And for Joe Biden, someone who gave his entire adult life to Washington, to be at the end of his career, basically, coming back to D.C. To become the president of the United States when, frankly, the nation is in crisis, I think is really an extraordinary moment. And you can imagine, I think, that that must be weighing on him as he is waiting to come off that airplane, waiting to take on a lot of ceremonial duties that we'll see later today, but also to take on the task fully tomorrow. The COVID crisis, the economic crisis the country is facing, and of course, the deep, deep partisan divisions, and frankly, the rise of hatred and hate groups and domestic terror that we've seen really show itself in the last month. These are all the tasks that he faces, but it's going to someone who, as we've been talking about, knows Washington perhaps better than almost anyone in this town.